Hi everyone. Welcome to English 223, Gothic and Horror Lit. We're going to take a little time today to go over the major points of the syllabus. But make sure that you read the entire syllabus as it's posted to Canvas because everything in it applies to you personally. So you want to make sure that you know everything that's in the syllabus. Okay, it seems a little weird to start the course off by warning you about it. But I do want to point out that this is a class in Gothic and horror literature that's designed for adult college students. Now, by definition, as we will learn, horror literature is a literature of transgression. And it's constantly pushing the envelope in terms of what is culturally accepted regarding violence, gore, and even sexuality. So, this course definitely will include works that have graphic scenes of violence, um, some graphic scenes of sex, and definitely some use of four-letter words. Okay. Now, it's very important to me not to offend anyone. So I'm including this warning so that people who might have personal beliefs that are opposed to any of these conventions or people who might be easily offended or even become ill will know what kind of course that this is going to be because I really don't want to offend anyone. And if any of those situations might be particularly problematic for you, I really suggest that you consider dropping this class and trying to find an English literature course that would not offend you because I do want us to have a good time looking at literature, including some modern literature, but I really, really don't want to offend anyone. Okay? Okay, that's me. My name is Professor Deborah Oakey, but you can just call me Deb. If you're not comfortable calling professors by their first name, you can call me Professor Deb or Professor Oakey if you prefer, but I'm really not a very formal person, and I'd rather that you just call me Deb. There are a number of ways of contacting me listed on the syllabus, but really the best way to get in touch with me is to contact me by sending an email through Canvas. My health isn't good, so I'm not on campus very often. If you call my office or you call the English department to get in touch with me, chances are you won't be able to reach me. But I do check my email every day, Monday through Friday. As a matter of fact, I check it several times a day, Monday through Thursday. So if you send me an email, I generally will be able to get back with you within 24 hours. That's the best and the fastest way to get in touch with me, and all you have to do is go to Canvas and send me an email. I always want to hear from you, whether it's to have something clarified, to ask questions, or just to talk. So please email me through Canvas whenever you would like to. Okay, I want to talk about the specific description of this course. The course description that's in the catalog is on the syllabus as well. But English 223 is a themes of literature course, so of course the catalog description is very, very vague because professors can put together classes on all kinds of topics that fall into the English 223 category. So I want to talk specifically about a description for this course. It explores the themes, plots, character settings, language, and conventions of Gothic and horror literature and film, from the very earliest works to the 21st century. And we particularly look at historical and cultural contexts and how they are encoded in the literature and how that literature critiques societal fears and values. And I state again here that by definition, Gothic and horror literature deals with transgression. It tends to push the borders. And because that is the very nature of Gothic and horror literature, this course isn't recommended for students who find graphic depictions of violence and sexuality, or four-letter words, objectionable. So that's in the actual course description, which actually the counseling office has been provided with and should have given you a copy of before you signed up for this class. But just because they're supposed to, of course, doesn't necessarily mean they did. Okay, there's some information on the syllabus about department requirements for the course, but again, they're very vague. So here's what we actually are requiring for this class. You're going to produce a 5 to 7 page analytical term paper in MLA style that discuss certain aspects of literature that's covered by the course. And I will give you, in fact, both this week and then closer to the end of the semester, you will be provided with an assignment sheet that gives you details on what needs to be in the paper and how it needs to be formatted, and gives you some questions that you can choose from as suggestions for how you can write your paper. You're going to identify on quizzes that you'll take on Canvas your familiarity with the important characters, relationships, plot points, settings, and so forth of the literary works and movies that we watch. And then often there will be videos with information from literary critics on the weekly assignment sheets on Canvas. And the quizzes will cover both the literature and those videos. And this is really important, as we're going to discuss in a few minutes. We're going to work together to have discussions on discussion boards of the works that we read and the movies that we watch. Okay, here are your materials of instruction, and there are a couple of things that I particularly want to point out about this. The two main books that we use are American Gothic Tales by Joyce Carol Oates, and it's a collection of short stories. Most of our short stories will be found in this book. Not all of them, but most of them. So this one is one of our major books. The other one is The Gothic Tradition. It's a largely blue book, and selections from some older novels in particular are assigned out of this book. So when you see on the table on the home page, you'll see the assignment list. And if you see the word Oates followed by page numbers, that means that it's in this book. And if you see the word Stevens followed by page numbers, that means that it's in the blue book, the Gothic Tradition. So those two books in the top row are what are referred to on the assignment list on the home page as Oates and Stevens. So I want to make sure that you know what that means. Okay. And then on the bottom row are the three novels that we're going to read. First we'll read The Shining by Stephen King. It's a rather long novel, but it's a really good one. And we read it first for two reasons. It's not due for several weeks, so you have time to read the novel. And also, as we'll see, we're reading The Shining in connection with the undead because it's a ghost story. But it also applies to every unit we work on other than the Lovecraft unit, because the only thing in the Lovecraft unit are the stories written by Lovecraft. But it definitely works very well for domestic horror, which we're going to have a unit on, and madness and murder, which we're going to have a unit on. So The Shining works into all of the units and also would work into a paper discussing any of those units. It would work well as a novel for the paper for that.
So we read it first, but it's rather long. It's a really good book, though, so I don't think you should have too much trouble reading it. The second book that we're going to read is the one in the center, and that's The Other by Thomas Tryon. I gotta tell you, I love this book. I absolutely love it. It is the only book I have ever read in my life that has caused me to scream out loud. I read this when it first came out in the 1970s, and it was out of print for a really long time. And it finally came back into print. Interestingly enough, I think the first semester I taught this course, when I first created this course. And it was going to come out in October, and I was so afraid that the bookstore wouldn't be able to get the book that I actually purchased 31 copies and handed it out to the students because I really wanted to read this book. A lot of students tell me that of everything we read all semester, this is their favorite piece. It's not a very well-known work, but it's really, really good. Especially you get to a certain point and it's just got one of those twists in it. And so it's a good book up to that point, and then once you reach that point, it's like, holy cow, I didn't see that coming. And then it's even better from there. So it's an excellent book. Zombie is a really interesting book. It's written by Joyce Carol Oates, who is the editor of American Gothic Tales. And Oates is not strictly a horror writer. She writes in a lot of different genres, but she's a very respected author of our time. And the reason that I chose Zombie for Madness and Murder, it was the book that first occurred to me for that unit, to tell you the truth. But I tried several other novels before I settled on Zombie because it is written as if it were a journal of a serial killer along the lines of Jeffrey Dahmer. And it has some kind of rough language in it, and it gets a little graphic in places. So I tried several other books, but either students were already really familiar with the story from having seen the film, such as Silence of the Lambs and Psycho, or I picked a book that people liked, and then it went out of print and I couldn't get it anymore. So I finally settled on Zombie. It is a good book, and it is the last thing that we read for the class. So the way it works out is that if you're fairly happy with your quiz scores and your discussion board scores, and you know you're not going to use this book in your paper, you technically can get away without reading it without it having much of an effect on your grade. So if you begin to read it and you find that it's too offensive, you can get away without reading this book if you do well on everything else in the course. But I think it's a really good book, and it does address one possible answer to the question that we always have when these serial killers appear, which is, how can a human being, what goes on in their heads that allows them to do that to people? And Oates attempts to address that issue, and I think she does a reasonable job. So those are the books we're going to use, and remember, on the list of assignments on the home page, if it says Oates and has page numbers after it, it means this book. And if it says Stevens and has page numbers after it, it means this book. Okay, let's talk about evaluation and how you're going to be graded, because I know that's important to you. It's important to all of us. First of all, as I've already mentioned, there will be quizzes. The quizzes will include questions on major plot points, characters, and relationships of the assigned literature. I'm not going to pick some nitpicky little detail and ask you a quiz question on it. If it's on the quiz, it's going to be something that deals with something fairly major in the literature. One thing that I do need to warn you about reading The Shining, watching Stanley Kubrick's movie, The Shining, will not help you. Kubrick's movie was so different from King's book that when the film came out, those of us who had read the book were really upset. And King himself was really angry. But we're going to talk about why Kubrick made the changes that he did in the movie. And he was attempting to do something with that film that King hadn't been intending to do with the book. But if you watch the movie instead of reading the book, you will not pass the quiz on The Shining, because the quiz is set up specifically to make sure you don't. Okay? So make sure that you read the book, or you won't know the answer to any of the questions on the quiz. The quizzes, of course, will be taken on Canvas, and links for the quizzes will be included on the weekly assignment list for each week. The quizzes are 5 questions long, and you have 10 minutes to complete the quiz. You can access the quiz only one time. So make sure that you studied everything in the materials that are presented before you click on the link to the quiz. Because once you click on the link to the quiz, you have 10 minutes to complete it, and you can only access it once. Because after all, if I let you see the questions and then go back and study it, you'll only study what answers the questions. I mean, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I'm not that stupid. So that's something to keep in mind about the quizzes. Now, if you have an accommodation from the Disability Resource Center, the DRC, that allows you to have more time to complete quizzes, you'll have 20 minutes to complete each quiz instead of 10. But in order for you to get that accommodation, you have to get a form from the DRC, and you have to email it to me as an attachment, and I have to receive that accommodation form before you get extra time. It's not retroactive. So if you don't send it to me until the 3rd week of class, you don't get to go back and retake the quizzes with longer time. That's not the way the accommodation works, and that's a college policy. It's not just something that I do. Okay? So if you do have an accommodation sheet that allows you extra time for quizzes, you want to make sure that you attach that to an email as quickly as you possibly can. The quizzes, like everything else on this course, are due at 9 a.m. on the Tuesday that the assignment is due. And at precisely 9 a.m., the quiz is locked down. So if you don't have the quiz finished by 9 a.m., if you're still working at it by 9:01 a.m., the quiz will lock down and you won't be able to finish the quiz. To tell you the truth, the actual deadline that I have in mind is like midnight Monday night. I give you the extra 9 hours for students who work particular shifts or different kinds of shifts and might have something quick to finish up in the morning if they work, say, a night shift and don't get off work until like 7:30 or 8 a.m. But the intention really is that you'll have everything done by sometime Monday. The deadlines aren't until 9 o'clock, and I don't check anything until 9 a.m. on Tuesday, but that is a very sharp deadline, and it's very definite. There's no leeway for it. And I don't accept late work, including quizzes, unless you can give me documentation of a serious illness, a hospitalization, or an incarceration of yourself, not somebody in your family. You see, the advantage, of course, of taking an online class is that you can take the class anywhere, particularly if you have a laptop. So if you travel for business, you can take the class wherever you happen to be, and that's a big advantage of online classes. But along with that goes the expectation that since you can do the work virtually anywhere, you're expected to do it, pretty much no matter what. And I don't accept late work. There are some very, very rare circumstances in which I will. So you need to talk to me about it, but don't be surprised if I tell you no. I also don't accept the excuse that your computer broke down or your internet was disconnected, because there are computers and the internet that people can use virtually all over the planet. if your computer breaks down or your internet stops working, certainly there are computers for student use on all three of the college campuses. There are computers at businesses like Federal Express and Office Depot and other businesses like that. There are computers with internet access at public libraries, so you should always be able to get to a computer, not to mention the fact that you shouldn't be taking online classes if you don't have reliable technology. So I expect you to meet the deadlines for everything. And to tell you the truth, students, I don't generally have a problem with online students not being able to meet the deadlines. Most of you, especially by the time you're taking a 200 level class, know whether online classes are a good idea for you, and you kind of know what's expected. Although some of the classes you have taken might not have weekly deadlines. I do, because I don't want students putting this course off until the last 2 weeks of the semester and then try to do all the work in 2 weeks. You don't learn anything that way. And if you're not going to learn anything, there's no reason to take the class. So that's information on the quizzes, and the quizzes will constitute 30% of your course grade. The discussion boards. Every week you'll be presented with several topics, and you can choose one of them and post to it. You have to post to at least one discussion board every week. And I encourage you to post to, or at least read, the other discussion boards as well. It's pretty much assumed that students who take this course are horror fans. And so how much we discuss the literature, and I participate in the discussions too, how much we discuss the literature really goes a long way to making this class more interesting. So if everybody does just the minimum that they're required, the class isn't going to be as interesting as it would be if people really got into it and really talked about the works. When I taught this class live, and I did until I became so ill that I couldn't, the discussions were absolutely wonderful. The students brought so much to the table. And the classes that were more excited about discussing things were the classes that were more fun. We had a great time in classes where people came anxious to talk about the literature, and that happened quite a bit because they were big fans of this type of literature. So I do encourage you to participate very actively on the discussion board. But the requirement is that you post to at least one discussion board. And if you talk about a piece of literature, you're required to include one specific example of how what you're talking about is demonstrated in the book, and to include the page numbers for that. And I'm going to produce a video very shortly that will show you exactly how I want you to respond to the discussion boards. And you also can't make up a discussion board if you miss it. The discussion boards are available for the entire semester. I never take them offline, because another thing that the discussion boards will be geared to do will be to help you talk about topics that can be used in your paper. So working with the discussion boards can help you prepare for your paper, as well as simply help you enjoy the class more and learn more. So I leave the discussion boards available all semester, and we can post to them all semester. But anything that's posted after 9 a.m. on the Tuesday that is the due date won't be counted towards your grade. Make sure that you read that entire section on the discussion boards, as well as the rest of the syllabus. And the discussion boards are going to count for 30% of your course grade. And then finally, there's a paper. You only have to write one paper for this class. It's a critical paper that, as I said, I will give you an assignment sheet that gives you several different ideas that you can choose from. And the last writing prompt, which is what they're actually called in, English teacher terms, the last writing prompt is actually write your own question. But if you do that, you have to clear what your topic with me, of course, before you start writing the paper. But if you come up with some idea of a way to approach the literature that hadn't occurred to me before, or that I don't specifically have listed on the paper assignment sheet, that's fine if you clear it with me. In fact, that could be wonderful. I've gotten some excellent papers on topics that people have come up with. And that paper constitutes 40% of your course grade. Okay, the course policies. Again, go over these very carefully in the syllabus itself, because I'm just going to, a couple of them I'm just going to mention are there, and some of them I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail. But make sure that you study all of them. First of all, there's in the policy is the, in the syllabus, get my words straight in a minute here, is the CSN policy on students with disabilities, and it talks about that accommodation form that we talked about, so make sure you study that. There is also the CSN policy for the Writing Center. Chances are that you worked with the Writing Center when you were taking English 100, 101, or 113, so you're fairly familiar with it. On Canvas, you can also link to Smart Thinking, which is very similar to the Writing Center. But I worked for Smart Thinking, and I volunteered in the Writing Center on the Cheyenne campus for a couple of years. And I personally think that the Writing Center is more helpful and is a better resource. But you might want to work with one of those resources in order to write your paper. For academic integrity and plagiarism, mainly in this class, that affects plagiarism in your paper. And I have listed on the syllabus all the things you have to do to avoid plagiarism. Like, don't have somebody else write your paper, don't download a paper, don't buy a paper from the internet, which frankly for this class would practically be impossible anyway. Put almost everything in your own words, except for an occasional quote from the literature. And you have to have an in-text citation for everything in the paper, not just direct quotes. But if you summarize a section of a book, or you summarize something that's presented by a literary critic, you need an in-text citation for that. Now, I will post a master works cited page that includes all the works cited entries for every resource we use in this course. And there are even a couple of extra ones, I think, from books we've used in the past. So for your works cited page, all you have to do is copy and paste the entries that I've already put together for you. So you don't have to worry about formatting the works cited entries. I've done that. But you do have to make sure that you know how to use in-text citations properly. Because if you don't use in-text citations properly, that's plagiarism. And you won't get a passing grade in the paper, and you probably won't pass the course. Oh, and one of the things that I forgot to mention, it was in the video and is also in the syllabus, is that no student who fails to submit a paper can pass the class. So if you don't complete and turn in the paper, you can't pass this course. I needed to mention that, and I meant to, but you know, sometimes I just get to talking and I forget to say some of the things I need to say. Like I said, I'm not a very formal person, so sorry about that. So do make sure that you review the academic integrity and plagiarism policy on the syllabus, because I do adhere to it and it's very important. Again, this is in the syllabus, just to make sure that it's an official thing. This course is designed for adults, specifically adult horror fans, and literature, movies, and discussion topics definitely will include social, political, religious, and cultural critique, and they definitely will include graphic depictions and discussions of sex and violence, as well as four-letter words. So if any of that might offend you, you need to drop the class. And the reason I emphasize that so much is that most of us who teach literature have a very similar kind of policy in our syllabus, because some people come to college expecting to read, I think, Little Red Riding Hood. Oh no, that's too much violence because of the wolf. Maybe Cinderella. And college literature courses aren't like that. And we don't discuss them the way they're discussed in high school. We discuss them as if we're talking to adults. So, we all had that policy or something similar to it in all of our syllabi for our literature classes. But in this class, it's particularly important because of the nature of the literature and the movies and that we're going to be working with. Okay? And speaking of which, there's a policy on withdrawal, and the last day to withdraw is stated in the syllabus, and it's also stated on the homepage of our Canvas site. You have to withdraw yourself if you want to drop this class. Professors no longer even have the ability to withdraw a student. So if you just stop participating, you won't be withdrawn from the class, you'll fail it. And something that's important to know is that if a student fails the class, professors have to provide, when we turn in the grades, we have to provide the last date that you participated in the class, which of course would be whatever Tuesday you last posted anything or took a quiz. And there is a super secret date that the faculty has no idea when it is or what it is, and I think it might even be set by the federal government. But if you stop participating in a class before that date and you get an F because you didn't participate, and the class was paid for by financial aid, the federal government will want that financial aid money back. Okay, so it's probably better to withdraw than to allow yourself to receive an F because you stopped participating. Incompletes. Now, I'm not sure whether this is a CSN requirement or whether it's just the English department that requires this, to tell you the truth. But in order to give an incomplete, I have to submit a contract that states what you have to do and a date by which you will complete the work in order to make up the class. And incompletes are very, very, very rare because, generally speaking, most of the students who manage to get an incomplete in a class don't finish the work and end up failing anyway. So in order to be considered for an incomplete, you have to have some catastrophic situation happen after the last day to withdraw. Because if it happens before the last day to withdraw, I expect you to drop the class, not to ask for an incomplete. And generally by catastrophic, I mean it has to be something really, really serious, like your own illness or hospitalization or incarceration, or your house burns down, or something really horrible happens. An example is I had a student at one point who asked for and received an incomplete because her boyfriend had beaten her so badly that she had broken ribs and her face had to have surgery. Okay, yeah, that was a reason for an incomplete. And she had an A in the class up until he did that. So, certainly I won't mind if you ask, but unless you have a fairly specific, serious problem after the last day to withdraw, don't be surprised if I don't grant you an incomplete. But if you do have something that comes up, definitely I will. And I will work with you, and I will let you set the deadlines for when the work needs to be done. I'll tell you what needs to be done, and you tell me when you can get it done by. And I'll give you as much time as I possibly can, because I do feel for students who have been working all semester on a class and then something god-awful happens so they can't finish the course. So I will work with you. And, I try to be as understanding and as empathetic as I can. But you won't get an incomplete if it's simply a matter of you didn't keep up with the work and therefore you haven't done a lot of it, or you put off working on the paper too long and so now you can't finish it. No, that won't be considered for an incomplete. Late work and using Microsoft Word. Now those two things don't seem to go together, but as you'll see when we get into talking about this, they actually kind of do. Okay. Now, like I said, I don't accept late work. You meet the deadlines or you don't get the credit. We're all really, really, really busy now. It's the way that our culture is set up, and I understand that. But what happens so often is that, we all have to put off the things that don't absolutely have to be done by a certain time. And in online courses, students often if they don't have to meet weekly deadlines, they often put off the class to the point that they can't possibly do a good job on it. Even good students do that. And I don't blame them because we all have so much to do these days. But that's why there are weekly deadlines in this class, to make sure you don't do that. Because if you did that, you'd just be paying for this class and basically getting nothing out of it. Also, it's important that we all work on the discussion boards together so that we can talk about what we're reading and what movies we're watching. So we need those specific deadlines, and I don't accept late work. Also, the paper, which is really the only thing in this class that this really applies to, has to be completed in Microsoft Word. It's the only word processing program I have on my computer. In order to produce these videos, I have to use several relatively large computer programs. I also do some web design work, which also takes a couple of large computer programs. And because of that, I've had to kill off everything that I don't need, and one of the things I killed off is every word processing program except Microsoft Word. So I can't open papers that are presented in any other program. It has to be in Microsoft Word, and it can't be a PDF document because I write comments on the paper, and it's hard to do that in PDF documents. But you have enough time, considering that I'm giving you an initial, or it's actually the finalized copy, but I'm giving you a copy of the paper assignment this week, and it's not due until finals week. You certainly have plenty of time to find some way to get the paper typed out in Microsoft Word. Now, this is why these two things go together. This is what I'll do when the paper is due, which will be the Tuesday of finals week. Either on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending, I will download all the papers from Canvas. That's the only way I can do it. I can't even check to see if people have turned in a paper without downloading the whole thing from Canvas. I'm not crazy about Canvas, and you'll probably hear that from me quite often. But I download all the papers, and first I check them against the roster to make sure that everybody has turned in a paper. And if I didn't receive your paper, I will send you an email and give you exactly 24 hours to email me your paper as an attachment in Microsoft Word. Okay. The next thing I do is I check to make sure that I can open every paper in Microsoft Word. I don't look at the papers at all. I just click on them, and if it opens in Word, I close it, and we're fine. Okay. If I can't open your paper in Microsoft Word, I will send you an email and give you exactly 24 hours to email me the paper in Microsoft Word, as an attachment, of course. Okay. Now, the reason I do this is because sometimes I get papers that look like they're produced in Word. I mean, they have the little Word icon next to them, but they won't open anyway. And of course, sometimes it's entirely possible that even if you submit the paper correctly in Canvas and follow all the instructions and do everything you're supposed to, the paper might not get transferred to me. Things just go wrong with technology sometimes, and students shouldn't be held responsible for those kinds of mistakes. And I figure if I give you exactly 24 hours, since you're supposed to check your email every day, that gives you time to see the email and email me the work if you actually had it done. Grades are, in order for grades to be fair, people have to have the same amount of time to work on a paper. But 24 hours isn't enough time to give a student significantly more time to work on the paper, and yet it's enough time for you to check your email and get back to me if either I didn't get your paper or it won't open in Microsoft Word. And the email will have a specific time that you have to email it to me by, and so forth and so on. But that's what I do with papers. And that's why the late work and using Microsoft Word policy kind of go together, because if I don't get your paper at exactly the right time, or if I can't open it in Microsoft Word, you have a 24-hour second chance grace period kind of a thing to email me the paper as an attachment in Microsoft Word. Okay?
Okay, that takes us to our final course policy, which deals with Canvas and email responsibilities. Now, graded papers, class announcements, other important information will be sent to you through your Canvas email. So you're expected to check your Canvas email every day, Monday through Friday, because some of those emails, as we've already talked about, require a response within 24 hours. You have to keep in mind that in an online class, email is really the only way I have to talk to you guys about this semester's class. The rest of the material is generally set up before the semester begins and is fine in terms of dealing with the course every semester. But there will always be things that I'll want to say to this group in particular, and the only way I can do that, since the class doesn't meet, is through email. So it's very important that you check your Canvas email every day, Monday through Friday. Now, most of the time I work Monday through Friday every week, except maybe for Thanksgiving and spring break. So I do check that email every day, and I check it every day, Monday through Friday. Now, sometimes I have meetings to go to, particularly on Friday. And if I have meetings that last all day, I might not be able to check the email after Friday morning. So something to keep in mind is that if you email me from, say, 10 a.m. on Sunday through 8 a.m. on Friday, I will make every conceivable effort to get back to you with an answer within 24 hours. But if you email me after 8 a.m. on Friday or over the weekend, you might not hear from me until Monday. Although I do sometimes check my email over the weekends too. One thing to keep in mind is that really the only way to get in contact with me is through Canvas email. It won't help you to call my office, and it won't help you to call the English department because, as I've said, I'm not in good health, so I'm not really on campus very much. But if you do email me, I will do my best to get back to you within 24 hours. Another thing to keep in mind that's very important is that Canvas creates a calendar or schedule and also a to-do list. But professors never actually see the to-do lists that appear on student Canvas pages. We don't see that at all, and so we don't know whether they're right or wrong. Therefore, I don't use the Canvas calendar schedule or the to-do lists. Everything that you need to know about what's due and when it's due will be on those weekly assignment pages, and that's what you need to adhere to. I've been told by students that sometimes the due dates on those to-do lists aren't right. And so they say, for example, oh, I didn't take the quiz because it wasn't on the Canvas to-do list. That really doesn't matter. You are to ignore those to-do lists in terms of this class. Everything you need is on the weekly assignment sheet, and you do need to do them by the due date on that weekly assignment sheet, regardless of what the to-do list says. Okay? Those to-do lists, I really don't even know why Canvas puts them together because they're not 100% reliable. And there's no way that a professor can even see them to make sure that they are reliable. So the best thing to do with that to-do list in any case, and the thing that you have to do with it for this class, is to ignore it completely. Okay, now other than that, the syllabus just closes with the idea that I retain the right to change the syllabus if I need to, although that doesn't happen very often. And then there's a list of topics that we're going to be covering. But of course, the specific schedule of assignments is available on the Canvas homepage. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this long presentation. I know that it wasn't particularly interesting, and it's awful to start off the semester with a list of things that you could do that could get you into trouble. I hate starting off the semester that way because it makes me sound like a terrible witch, and it makes it sound like there's a whole lot to do and a whole lot to keep track of. But really, I think you'll find once you get into this class that it's fairly easy to work with, and I mean it to be. But if you have any questions over the syllabus or this video or anything at all in the class, just send me an email through Canvas. And even if you just want to talk to me about something we're reading, or you just want to tell me about a fun time that you had over the weekend, believe me, I always want to hear from you. And I'm always just an email away. So do remember that if you have any questions or you need any clarification, just drop me an email through Canvas. Again, thank you so much for paying attention to this fairly lengthy presentation. I hope you have a great day.